Making your practice more sustainable can feel like an impossibly complex task. There are so many angles to consider and so many options available. That's why we decided to interview someone who has been trying to improve his practice's sustainability for years.
I'm an independent optician, so almost by definition, we buy and sell products. And if we sell a product or a particular frame or a particular product, then I feel we're endorsing it. So right from the very beginning, I wanted to be very careful that I did my best to source the products and make sure that they were manufactured in the most, what we would now say sustainable way, but ethical way as possible, really.
This is Simon Berry, who's been running Simon Berry Optometrist for the last 20 years, as well as distributing specialist children's frames and even recently producing testing equipment. So where did he start this journey?
The very first steps was just asking the questions. So when the frame reps were coming in, I was asking them where the frame was made, what it's made from. And then it got more and more involved, talked about carbon footprinting and which materials were better than others, which ones use more energy. I mean, asking the questions doesn't cost anything. Just to talk to the manufacturers about their product doesn't cost anything. Trying to decide the mix of stock is a difficult one because you could differentiate yourself and say that you're going to do sustainable brands. I mean, we have around about 15 ranges of sustainable frames, and I've done that deliberately because I think that's what I'd like us to be seen for, So when I take patients around the frame choice, I can show them all the sustainable brands that we have, and they don't cost any more. We make the same profit margins off those. And there is a cost involved in the waste streams if you're going to do that correctly, recycling the frames, making sure you're doing the clinical waste correctly. Obviously, there is a cost aspect to that. And there is a cost to using green energy companies at the minute. Green energy is still more expensive than other forms of energy. I guess it's just what you want for your business, really. I guess, do you want to make a fortune or do you want to create something you're proud of?
Simon decided to make a questionnaire that would quiz the brands he was thinking of buying frames from. The questions range from the recyclability of the product to the ethics of the labour at their factories.
The results from that questionnaire we published on our website from different manufacturers. Some of them were very helpful. There's a manufacturer called Zeal, which were fantastic. They went back to the farmers where the castor oil plants were farmed, where the oil that made the frame, and they were brilliant. Mostly, though, it was just blank looks. The reps that were coming in had no idea about the frames, and because they were so far removed from the manufacturer, because a lot of them were distributors, they weren't manufacturing, you just couldn't find the information. It wasn't possible to find the information.
It's all well and good to clean up your environmental impact, but is it worth it? Did Simon's patients care?
They like that story with their frames. If they go and talk to their friends and say, look at these glasses, they cost me whatever. Or say, look at these glasses, they're made from recycled fishing nets from a Cornish company. It's that story. It's that kind of, they're a bit more engaged in it. And not everyone's bothered by it, but there are people that are. And they're the nicer people to deal with anyway. There's quite a lot of patients that really like the idea of sustainability. Being sustainable now is a commodity. Everybody is talking about it. And I think how it differs now is that everybody has a sustainable claim. Whether those claims are genuine or not is another thing. But I think that everybody now claims their product is sustainable and ethical. One of the difficulties is actually knowing which patients are bothered about sustainability, because everybody is not bothered by it, and there are a lot of people that would still want to buy something quite cheap and are not really bothered where they come from. And I've had quite a few experiences where I haven't mentioned sustainability to a patient, but then they've come back later and asked me about it. Again, I don't know if I can mention things, but Lindbergh, because of the way they're manufactured, it's all made in one factory, is quite a sustainable brand. But also it's a very, there's lots of other good things about that brand. And I remember one patient I was talking about Lindbergh too, but I didn't mention the sustainable angle. And he was talking to a friend of his who I had mentioned that too. And he came back and said, well, why didn't you mention it to me? So it is difficult to pick the patient that's bothered about those issues. It is changing. People are more aware of the issues. And I think people that are coming into the practice are more aware of, sustainable issues, carbon footprinting, the amount of plastic used, all of these type of things. I think the issue now is more, what's the impact of those issues? There's a huge thing about plastic, but if you think about the amount of plastic in a frame, even if it is being used in a fairly unsustainable way, there's not that much plastic in a frame that's going to last that patient about 2 to 3 years. And I think the other thing is we have to be a little bit realistic about when we talk about sustainability, because I think it's great and everyone thinks it's really nice and it's nice to be bothered about sustainability. But actually, if you look at being truly sustainable, that means patients reglazing their frames, patients making their frames last 4 or 5 years. And as a business, you don't particularly want that. So there's always going to be balances in there. There's always going to be things that don't quite work. with our industry.
This leads us on to more than just products. What can we do beyond sourcing? Should we be looking at other things?
We think about the products mostly, but we don't think about the things that we can do in our own practices. So even things as daft as making sure you're supporting your staff, you're supporting the local community. But obviously things like the energy, where you get your energy from. We changed some windows in the practice that weren't very energy efficient. And we changed insulations and things like that. We use a green company for our energy, things like that. I think they're just as important as choosing the products. We registered as carbon neutral. So my practice is registered as carbon neutral. I've never advertised that fact because I think it's a bit of a con, really, because most of the carbon that I produce is coming from the products that I stock. But in terms of registering for a carbon neutral symbol, that doesn't count because that's the manufacturers. The only things that count in the carbon is the amount of carbon that I produce myself. And that's very little because we use a green energy company. We use TerraCycle to recycle frames. And it's actually quite an expensive thing for us to do. I think the biggest issue is the transparency, because you don't know what that plastic is. And before you recycle something, you've got to know what the plastic is, if it's cellulose acetate, if it's petroleum-based plastic. But that said, it's not just the frame. There is lots of waste plastic within the frame. And I think I like the idea of some of these companies now that are accepting their frames back for being recycled, because rather than going into a recycling bin, we send it back to the company and then we know that it's recycled properly.
To close it out, we wanted to know what Simon's top 3 things practitioners should start doing in their practices.
Start asking the questions about where the products are made from. Look at your energy use. The third one would be the waste streams that we produce. It's a very boring topic, but what we do with our waste and making sure that it goes into the correct stream to make sure that as much gets recycled as possible is an important topic. It was a complete surprise. It's just really nice to be recognised for it. It's a lovely award to be recognised for it, because I don't think sustainability is done much in our industry.